Hi everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Inspiring Technology Stories of Success. We have Tim Byrne with us today, VP of Engineering for Rakuten Kobo. So it was really great to get you to have a chat with me, and really interested in going through your career and background and how you got into IT. But thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Much appreciated.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I always started with the same question for everybody. How did you land into IT? What was the spark that got your interest into technology?
Yeah, I actually think it was, thinking about this was the first time my father came home with our first home computer, which was in about 5 very large boxes. Took us probably most of a day to get it set up and working, but I absolutely loved it. They couldn't get me off it.
Can you remember what it was? What computer?
I don't, but I remember, it was the monitors that were like that deep. They weighed an absolute ton. And it had the old 8-inch floppy disks and the 5.5-inch floppy disk drive. And it didn't do a whole lot, but it was absolutely fascinating. And I think that was probably the spark. I was maybe 12, 13 years old when that kind of happened, and from then on I've been kind of in love with computers one way or another since.
And with that system, can you remember if there was any kind of games or anything on it that maybe sparked your interest, or what was it that was there even paint on it at that stage?
There was paint, which was used a lot. We had some game which I think was Conan the Barbarian, and it had like 9 or 10 discs with the story that everyone knows, which is you'd get to disc 6 and it'd go back to the start again in terms of loading. But we'd sit for hours at it trying to get stuff working, and even just playing around with the MS-DOS prompt, trying to get it to do stuff was just fascinating, because it was all new.
Excellent. No, that's really interesting, and I think a lot of the stories that I've had and people that I've spoken to, it's really childhood memories of, I think it was one of the guys that I had on was a certain system, even like a typewriter or something like that came into the house, and it was like, how does that work? And then always having that mindset, I want to take it apart, I want to see what's happening inside the components and then put it back together. So it always stems from that early childhood memory, I think. So that's really, really interesting and great to hear. But then touching on like getting into IT and thinking about it seriously as a career, like when did that kind of manifest?
So I went on and did computer science and maths in NUIG. So lots of coding, programming, logic stuff in there, which was great, really enjoyable 4 years. Out of that, I got a job pretty much straight away and went off celebrating in Turkey for 2 weeks, spent all the money I hadn't yet earned. And I got a phone call about 10 days into my holiday. I won't name the company. But they basically lost some massive contract, so they were pulling back on all of their grads. So their graduate program that year was going back to zero. So I came home with my tail between my legs a little bit. But I called up my professor, the maths professor in NUIG, and he basically said, because I think it was early September at this stage, and he was like, most college courses for their education are closed, but he knew Professor Keenan up in Michael Smurfit, and he said he really recommended this course, and he put a call in and he got me onto that course. And that was basically management science is what it was called, but it was computer programming and business skills.
And what were the languages, or what were you working on then? Not to give anything away there, but
to be fair, it was Java. We had a little bit of Fortran as well. But the great thing about that course for me was it kind of mixed maths, computer science, but also business as well. We had to do things like come up with companies, like set up a fake company and present what the pitch was and things like that. And that was brilliant in terms of accelerating my ideas of where I wanted to be in terms of a career, because I think out of my first course it was very technical, but the masters, which I kind of fell into just through a series of coincidences, but also leveraging a network, really put me on the path then of exploring technology, business, and also I had developed quite a strong interest in finance with a couple of the other guys in that course there as well. So part of my thesis was based on could we use basically waveform technology, which kind of like maps out sound waves and things like
that's
that.
what I was thinking of that.
Could we feed in historical stock prices to find predictive trends?
Yeah.
Basically, could we fake the stock market and somehow become millionaires overnight?
Of course.
It was brilliant and it was fascinating, but it didn't succeed. But it was a great experiment to run.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear, and I think a lot of people, again, from the people I spoke to, have came from that industry as well, or from the start of radio network kind of frequencies, and then came into then the more as IT progressed. A lot of people have came from that background, and then you know, like obviously you found your interest in the finance piece, and it's great as well with the business side, because a lot of companies now, you know, with engineers, yes, we have people that just, you know, love the code, but they need to have that understanding of the business need and why the business wants to do something, as opposed to, you know, as an engineer, what you would like to do, because it's really interesting. So I think that skill of pitching like a Dragon's Den sort of a way, I suppose, set up your career in terms of the business side as well as the technical side.
I think it's absolutely critical if you want to have a high performing engineering team, that they have to have a real sensitivity to the customer need and to the business need, because your business teams and your product management teams, of course, will have the market research and the ideas that in terms of where the product should go, but the technology people will also have great ideas for where the platform can evolve to and how you can do things easier and faster. But they can only have that if they have a good understanding of what you're trying to achieve in the business. And I think having that parity between engineering and product and the business teams is brilliant, because if you're working together collaboratively to try and get somewhere, you're going to get there a lot quicker with everybody on board, as opposed to here's our ideas, you implement them, and then we'll come up with the next idea, which is, it's more of a factory line.
But that's it, and 100%. And like even my little one, they're doing like show and tell and stuff in school, you know, and they're reading a book, or, you know, their favourite toy that they play with, they get up and present back. So I think, you know, that's really interesting, even at such an early age, to be taught that is really, really good. But then touching back to, you know, you came out, your role didn't work out for you that you thought you land. You celebrated like you scored a goal in the All-Ireland final. But but anyway, you then jumped into getting your first role. Can you have any recollection of how that came about?
Yeah, so I saw a notice up in the college one day, up on the jobs notice board in Smurfit College, for a company that I had never heard of, Murex Financial Technology, although the FinTech phrase didn't really exist back then. And I applied for it. I got that job, which was kind of product consulting. And so Murex are basically the world leaders in financial technology for capital markets. And what that means is basically they build trading platforms, back office systems, risk management for the biggest banks all over the world, for interbank trading and all that kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
So I think even the fact that my thesis was on, you know, could we do something with stock prices, kind of helped me kind of get into that role, because I had something, even if that wasn't a successful outcome, it was still showing that keen interest in finance and technology that they kind of wanted to see.
Excellent. And that's really what we're trying to touch on as well, is that when you're a student, or how you stand out from the crowd, and, you know, particularly in certain markets, that, you know, we have booming markets, we have a market sometimes that isn't as strong. So like, how do you stand out? And that's really, you know, the piece that we're trying to get across to people. So with yourself, like, you felt that you got yourself across because of the financial project and the project that you done in college kind of jumped out for them?
It was a big help. I mean, you need the other stuff as well. You need, you know, you need the core skill sets. But I firmly believe that, like, and when I'm interviewing candidates and I'm talking to people about roles in our company, the thing that's most important for me is that they have that curiosity about what we do and why we do it. I always love when an interview is not a series of questions and a series of answers, but is an equal discussion. Like, they're asking me almost as many questions as I'm asking them, because that...
There's some insights to anyone that interviews with you.
I don't know, but I do. I love it, because it becomes more of a conversation. I think you learn things. You learn things from them in the interview. In a 40-minute interview, you can get a lot of things from people about what you do in your daily life as well by just having that conversation. But when they step up to the level and they kind of put you back on your heels a bit and ask you questions about how you're doing things and why you're doing things, it shows you that, you know, they're interested or even as far as potentially passionate about what they do. And that's half the battle. You know, it's not just a job. It's, I'm interested in this role, but I'm also interested in this role that's in this company that's doing this particular thing that provides value in that particular way. And if somebody kind of has that chain worked out when they're talking to you, interviews are really seamless and really easy, and they flow, and you always run out of time. Whereas I often find with interviews where, you know, and people kind of go, do you have any questions for me? No, it's like, you know.
So that leads into the advice that you'd give to candidates and people that would interview you from it, like let's say a grad or even experience level. If, you know, someone's sitting in front of you, like what would you say would be the best advice in terms of, you know, preparation and what they should be, you know, demonstrating through the interview process?
They have to show that curiosity, that interest. You know, obviously they have to have that, their whatever their craft is, they're an engineer with whatever technologies they've been working in, that they, you know, they have that skill. They can do that by contributing to open source projects. Like I said, the thesis that you choose, it can be a help, because you can use that in an interview as, I did this because I'm really interested in it and I'm fascinated in it, and you do that too, and that's why I should work in this company, because it's continuing something that I'm passionate about it. So showing that curiosity and that interest in what the company is and what it does is absolutely key.
Brilliant. So touching on then in your first role and then going through the ranks in Murex, because I know you spent a bit of time within Murex and you know, moved your way through the organization. So how did you find, you know, getting your first role, and you know, what were the things that you were doing to, let's say, be noticed in your role?
Yeah, Murex was an interesting time. It was, when I joined it, pretty small teams and huge pressure. I'm still friends with a lot of people that we worked with in those early years. We're actually going off doing an adventure race this weekend, the whole lot of us together.
Brilliant.
But it was really formative. It was high pressure. It was late nights. And I'm not recommending that this is what you need to do, but just in my own experience.
There's no substitute for hard work though, really, is there? Like,
but it was hugely focused, hugely intense, but everybody had each other's backs in terms of the team. We had a really good team, so it was good people surrounded with good people, all with a common purpose. And even at a young age, when you didn't really know that language and didn't understand the kind of having the purpose and the values, it was there. And it meant that, you know, we'd fly off to do a demo in Beirut or wherever it was, and you'd be up till 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, configuring it, and then starting the demo at 7 a.m. and then
hoping it works.
Hoping it works. And I just, to this day, I always remember the head of sales, David, standing on the stage, all of the banking officials in the auditorium watching us. And he was talking and peripheral vision watching me as I was configuring the thing that they were asking about. And it just suddenly worked. And it was like, oh yeah, of course this works. This is how it is.
Like a movie, isn't it?
But it was, and it was super high pressure. But it like everybody supported everybody, which was amazing. But you had to be brave and put yourself out there and take on the challenges. So like, 3 months into that role, straight out of college, my boss, who was brilliant, basically went, right, you're going to Prague and you're doing a 2-day training to the risk department in the bank in Prague. And I nearly crumpled inside. I was like, you can't send me to do a 2-day training. I don't even understand. And I studied night after night, weekends, whatever it took. It was like, this has to go well. And it went well, and it was great. But that was like you just need that courage, jump into it, take it on, and then ask for the help. I think the other thing that was interesting about that time is that it was hugely firefighting, you know, great parties and lots of fun as well. But it did then start to transition, because that can't last forever. And it was fascinating living through the 10 years in the company, where we went from the early years of, you know, high intensity, on every front. The partying was wild, the work was, you know, huge hours, you know, really intellectually intense as well. But then you get to a point where you go, well, now we have to scale teams and we have to grow an organization because the business is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can't survive like that forever. So we had to transition into a more structured organization with a more standardized cadence of work for people. And that was fascinating. Because
was that hard then, obviously, that transition? Because obviously you're going from, let's say, a startup, scale-up environment to then, you know, creating a more established, let's say, not department structure, but it's kind of moving in towards that model. So was that a little bit harder then to transition into, you know, being hands-on, really hands-on technical, to then help with the build out of that?
It was, and I still see it in my current role today, which is some people just love the firefight. It's for them, and that's the world they should live in. Other people don't, and they thrive in a different environment. And it's about finding then the balance in there. And in Murex, I think in my latter years, we were really starting to find that balance of taking on big projects, but being more organized about it, and removing the unnecessary firefights, which was, you know, bringing more quality into our products, you know, having more structured release processes, better DevOps, all these kind of things that kind of mean that you're not firefighting the wrong things. Like every company in the world, you're going to have that point where in a project, you just have to call it and go heads down and go, like, we've got 3 weeks to get this out the door. Let's get on board. And if you've built the right culture in the organization and you're transparent with people, most people will follow and go, okay, look, let's kill it for the next 3 weeks, and then we'll all take a break and we might have a big party and do something to kind of have that release and wind down. But it's finding that balance is the challenge.
Excellent, because there's a lot of good advice there, I think, in way of leadership, as you said, is, you know, setting those goals, trying to focus on the right areas, which, you know, I'm sure you'll have some battle scars as well, where some are right, some may not be. But also having that downtime and having a time frame of like you know, working to maybe the deadlines, and then a bit of downtime to you know, get the energy back in the win back in the sales again. So that's really interesting. But another point that I'd like to touch on is, because you're within your career, and let's say a lot of people, let's say at a leadership level now, not to, you know, generalize, but a lot of people over the last, you know, say 10, 15, 20 years, or even, you know, back to parents and grandparents, you know, they'd be in companies, or maybe a couple of companies throughout their lifetime. And we're seeing more so, let's say, that the younger generation would be maybe in a company for a couple of years and work on a certain component. They want to try new things, or, you know, work for a company that's more scaling, a more stable company, different industries. So, like, what would your advice be to people that are, you know, engineers or people in technology, DevOps, whatever, but they want to become a leader or be seen as a leader? Their eventual goal is to get to CTO. So, you know, what advice would you give to those people that are, you know, just, you know, doing a couple of years and then moving in? Like, because with yourself, and obviously I don't know fully your journey, but you could kind of see when you're in an organization and you're in it for long enough, you can kind of see this is the promotion plan, and this is, you know, this is the opportunity that you can then go up into management or director, etc. And then organically the leaders in that business, from a business perspective, know you as a person, because they've seen you there over the years. They know how you know, deliver things. You have, let's say, the badges. Where if you're going into a new company and you have the badges, but, you know, you're trying to become a leader in that organization, like, what would your advice be to future leaders, let's say?
I mean, everybody has to ultimately find their own path. You know, when I look back on my own career, the time I spent in Murex was fantastic, hugely challenging at times, but fantastic. Would I have done it differently? Potentially, if I look back on it, I probably should have changed roles a little bit more, or I would have if I had a do-over. More so just to get experience in different industries. I think the reality is, if you want to get to a senior leadership level, you have to have a relatively broad understanding. But that can be achieved in different ways, especially now there's so many conferences and networking events and areas of training and self-improvement and investment that you can take on, that you can potentially stay within that one organization, but still make sure that you're spending time to invest in yourself. It's a benefit to the company that you're doing that anyway, because you'll bring ideas in, you'll bring innovation into your company. But I still think seeing how different organizations work, how you meet different leaders along your way, how you learn from them as you go, good and bad, will be hugely helpful. So in those early years when you have the opportunity to move, and you know, a lot of people who are managing teams now will want to kill me, but I do think you should try different industries, especially if you haven't found that passion yet. So if you start out in a fintech area and you realize, you know, fintech is not for me, I don't really particularly love finance. Go and find a med tech. Go and work in a med tech company for a few years. You know, at a minimum, what you might find is some of the crossover there is interesting, and maybe you bring some of the fintech ideas into that world that nobody's thought of before. But ultimately, 10 years down the road, which is what you need to be thinking about, not 1 year down the road, those experiences will stand to you.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think any leader that I've spoken to, they've spoken about the, you know, passion. You have to have a passion for it. If you don't have a passion, then, you know, try find something new. And that kind of leads back to what you've spoke about in Murex, is the purpose. You had a team, you had a purpose, you had a goal, and no matter what country or what room you were in, you felt supported with the team around you, that you were going to achieve what you were going to achieve. You win together, you learn together, is kind of what I'm seeing here. And then, like, you know, what made you become a leader? Like, so a bit, like, what made you step up and not say, listen, I love coding, or, you know, I can solve these technical problems, I've no worries there. And you know, the people aspect, I know when people move into leadership, there's so many different plates that you need to be spinning. So yeah, what drove you, or, you know, what was that bug in terms of leadership?
I won't say I love coding. I never, it was never the plan. I didn't have, like, I want to be the leader in an organization. That was never my you know, vision over time. I think for me, what I discovered, especially through that transition in Murex and also now in Rakuten Kobo, what I've come to really enjoy is building teams, building high performing teams, and mostly seeing them succeed. So even in my current role now, I've established a strong leadership team, but my philosophy is I want them to succeed. I want them individually to succeed in their careers. I want them to feel like their teams are succeeding, to see product launches happening, to have ownership and accountability, to have those wins, to learn from those losses as well.
Brilliant.
So ultimately, that is my job, is to clear the obstacles out of the way of all these people who are brilliant and far better coders than I could ever be, thankfully.
I hope they're watching.
Well, and I also say it's not my job to write code. I couldn't do it. Like, I'm so long out of it now, I couldn't do it. But my job is to make sure that they have all of the tools, the knowledge, the training, and the environment that is conducive to them doing the best that they can do. And if you can do that, then you'll start to move along the path of a high-performing team and really kind of making something special happen.
Excellent, excellent. And then just touching on leadership then, do you feel that it's something that's naturally ingrained in you? Like, so let's say outside of technology, I know you're a sportsman as well from speaking to you. So do you feel that, you know, when you're on the pitch playing, did you feel like you're, you know, a natural leader, or were you know, quite different as well when you were, you know, playing sports?
Well, my wife said to me, I always tend to take control when things happen. I don't know if that's leadership or something else, but I think some of it is natural, in terms of some people kind of do tend to assert themselves in that kind of a leadership role. But a lot of it is learned as well in terms of skills. So leadership, you can be dictatorial in a leadership fashion, and that doesn't work for a lot of people. People don't like being told what to do. So there's an awful lot of skills that you have to add into that kind of, okay, I have a sensibility that I want to kind of, you know, improve this thing or make it better, but how do I get people to come along with me? How do I convince people that this is the right thing to do? Some of the things, you know, more recently that I've been kind of striving with is trying to take more time to engage with people who maybe years ago I wouldn't have got on well with, or from a pure professional context, or we don't have a shared value system. And in my early years, I perhaps would have, been a bit abrasive or
switched it off, not listened.
Yeah, just, you do your thing, I'll do mine. And now I'm kind of going, well, actually, there must be a reason that they believe that I'm wrong. And surely I can learn something from that. Or at a minimum, if I understand their point of view in detail, I can use it to enrich my own perspective.
You can agree and properly disagree. So you have the data, let's say, and then you can...
or I can change my mind. I'm open to have that conversation, to go, explain to me why you think I'm fundamentally wrong in my approach to this, and then walk through it. And then you might go, okay, if I'm not defensive and I don't shut it down, there are some valid arguments in here. I mightn't agree with everything, but I can take 2 or 3 things out of this, bring it across to my side and go, okay, maybe I can now change my perspective to make it a little bit different, and gets that person on board. They feel heard, they feel included, and it changes the dynamic.
Brilliant. You've touched on a lot of points that will probably lead into the next question. So like, you've talked about like high performance teams and creating that good team environment. So like, what are your beliefs to say, like, this is what will create a high performing team? Because you appreciate, like, some teams, when you land in, they may not be performing at the optimum level that they are, and it takes time, to put that together. So if you're having a team that you're saying the challenge is, you're underperforming at the moment, like, how would you go about creating that, performing team and moving up the levels?
I think it starts out with honesty and transparency. They can be difficult conversations to start with, but asking questions and getting it all out on the table. We've rolled stuff back from production 3 times in a row over the last 2 years. We've missed deadlines. There's facts there that can be used, but it shouldn't be used as a club to kind of beat the team down with. It should be used as let's understand what went wrong and why. And out of that, the way I would engage it, and what I have done in the past, is you need to define where the bar is. Like, this is the expectation of where we're at. And by the way, if we get to here, these are the things we get. We're going to start succeeding in our projects. We're going to create space and time for more innovation. We're going to spend less time on bug fixing and maintenance. We're going to start doing more fun stuff in the office. Creative days, innovation days, where we maybe bring in external people to help us come up with ideas as to how we can reorg our teams or how we can improve our skill sets. We're going to start doing experiments. But ultimately, you have to get that buy-in from everybody, and that starts with transparency and accountability, and telling people, look, this is where we're at, and if we're honest with ourselves, this is where we're at. This is where we need to get to. Now, we need to work on how we're going to get there. Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen over the last few years is that the expectation from business people, from the external forces, is fix that stuff tomorrow, because we need things working properly tomorrow. But if you want to build a high performance team, it's incremental change all the time. It's not turn that switch and we're in a good place now. That simply doesn't happen. It's every day, what's the little thing we can do to move things along? And that builds up over time.
For me, it's the roadmap that you've just explained. It's just like, this is the roadmap, this is where we want to go. And especially like people, when we have personal circumstances and other things that are happening that has affected the performance. So if you're just having that open dialogue and conversation, and people, I think, feel comfortable in having those types of conversations, then you're only going to get to the ground level. It's peeling back the onion, the layers, and saying, right, well, this is where we are, how can we build it back up? I think there's so many great examples that you've just demonstrated there. So then, looking at where you're at now and what you're doing day to day, like, what are the the challenges that you're facing? Because obviously you're in a really great organization in Rakuten Kobo. So like, what are you seeing in terms of obviously digital transformation? Everything we had in the pandemic, and companies are now more digitally aware, or if something big like this happens again, people have to work remotely and everything like that. So a big wide question, but like, what do you see? Because obviously we're talking about AI and machine learning and so many different aspects of Gen AI coming out as well. So yeah, what are your kind of thoughts on where you're at the moment and the challenges that you might see?
Yeah, I mean, the AI thing is interesting because it's like the massive cloud. Well, I shouldn't say cloud, but it's the dominating topic of our.
But you can talk about cloud because a lot of companies were in prem, and then we spoke about cloud for a long time, and then cloud really started to take off, AWS, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I think the day-to-day challenges are all still there. And you mentioned it before, you know, the human effect of, like, you know, dealing with people's issues, mental health issues, diversity issues, all of those things still need to be handled day to day. You know, striving on that performance, that high performance team path is still happening. Things like AI, in my perspective, at the moment, it's a tool that's going to enable us to do more. But we have to be careful about how we adopt it, how we use it, how we educate people on it. You know, rafts of policies have come out already in companies around, please don't put secure documentation into this thing. Like it's going out to the whole world.
And also as well, that like it's probably one of the first times, and I could be very wrong about this, where like governments are going to have to be heavily involved in terms of regulation and what we can actually do with the software. And I think for me, over the last 12, 24 months, and even just before, governments are actually waking up to this and saying this could actually be like, how are our population going to be working, or how are those roles going to evolve from where AI can enhance and enable that role to be done within AI, but how can it then, those people be enhanced to do a different role or something, that will, like, it's that skills gap, it's that educational piece. I think even at government level, they're like, right, it's probably going to be the biggest upskilling project the world has probably seen in a very long time.
Since the big old computers arrived into the house.
Yeah, exactly.
Using typewriters.
That the internet won't catch.
But this is it. It's like there's a huge race at the moment for the massive tech companies to kind of be the leaders in this space, and that's going to happen, and governments will have to figure out how they can temper that and make sure it doesn't go out of control. But also there's a whole, on a personal aspect, with young kids, there's the whole fear aspect of how AI will be used, in the negative
deep
context.
And stuff like that.
Deep fakes. You see the rubbish spam you get now from people, like, trying to get you to click on links and text messages. It's relatively basic, but it still works.
Depending on the audience,
Yeah, and if suddenly you've got, such a powerful technology that can start to, do deepfake video calls and things like that to kind of get people to do things they perhaps shouldn't do, or that's quite terrifying.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it completely is it's such an enhancement to productivity, or can be such an enhancement to productivity when used right. I think it's very, very exciting.
Especially in like the medical space and things like that, in terms of, quickness to diagnosis, and, using the past and what we've seen, in terms of even images or diagnosis of other people, and getting the quickness of diagnosis to then hopefully cure people or create new drugs and clinical trials and stuff like that.
I think that's the thing, which is every industry striving to figure out what's the smart way to use this technology and what will make sense. Like even for us, obviously on the engineering side, there's things like Copilot, which will help engineers be more efficient at writing code and writing test cases around that code, and that's great. That's a productivity aid. But from a business perspective, we're looking at it. I saw a use case recently where someone used AI to detect inappropriate images in graphic novels, for example, which was fascinating. So they created a database of inappropriate images, and now it basically uses that to determine whether or not images are violence or sexual or potential violence.
Which is to grade them then as well. They could be at a lower grade as well for like young people and children looking at, and now they're like, right, that needs to be regraded to an 18 plus or 16 plus, depending on the age and gradings. Then that's what people are looking at.
Or you can simply block that book from being published, because there is quite nefarious stuff being published in books behind the scenes that you need to catch a hold of. The other side of it,
especially on a digital platform like yourselves, it can be put out there. Like
and there's a lot of investment we do to block that stuff, but people are quite creative in how they can get stuff out there. The other areas, simple things like recommendations, for example. I've even used ChatGPT and Genesis a few times to kind of go ask it, recommend me a romance novel for a man, for example. And it came back and it was like, oh, you should read The Notebook and here's why. And it gave me an explanation and I just went, I'd actually read that now based on the recommendation. But it was brilliant because it was singular. This book, I think it's for you, and these are the reasons why. And the powerfulness of that is huge in terms of helping consumers identify the products that they actually want, as opposed to advertising to the consumers.
And I think that's brilliant. And I think as well, another point that you just, when you said that to me was, I think I was heading off on a small break somewhere and I just threw it into ChatGPT, where would you recommend? And you could put in your budgets. I know there's probably a few bugs they're probably trying to fix out as well, and the inflation, whatever. But when I threw it in, it gave you like good recommendations in terms of, you know, hotels that you might want to book, restaurants that you might want to eat in, and it's around the budgets that you have. So you can then, like, literally your whole weekend is planned. You can do a little bit of research, obviously look at some pictures online or whatever, but like how quick is that research coming back to you, and is excellent.
And that brings it back to the whole thing of trust but verify, which is use it, but then do your extra work afterwards, because the outcome may be
different. You get when the bill comes in the restaurant, they say order this and this, the bill comes, you're like, okay, what's that? But no, that's brilliant. No, really, really interesting. And then the final point, which I'd always ask is there any, you know, podcasts, the other question I'd like to ask is a leader in your life. Is there any leaders that you lean towards, you know, personally, or, you know, who has affected, let's say, your way of thinking as way of a leader?
Do you know what? I don't have like the one person that I go, that person is the guru.
Has it all?
Because I don't think anybody does. Like we see leaders rise and fall. We see leaders go off track. You know, we won't start naming Elon Musk and co. But but I think personally for me is my journey has been, you know, you learn from the good people at the start. I push back from the bad people, but now I'm in a space where I'm kind of going, I shouldn't say bad people, but, you know, people who have different value sets or whatever. Whereas now I'm in a position where everything's a learning opportunity. You can take something away from every person in terms of, you know, how you can improve yourself and how you can learn. I will say, and it kind of leads on to your last question actually, the one person I do have massive admiration for would be Sia Khaleesi, and I don't know if you've ever listened to any of his.
I haven't now, but a few people have mentioned it.
He's so he grew up in the projects in South Africa, obviously World Cup rugby captain, won the World Cup, but his humility is second to none. Like hearing him speak, I even heard him. He sat down the night before the World Cup final against England, and himself and his wife wrote out a to-do list for after the World Cup, which was they're going to set up a foundation. They're going to build a school in the project that he grew up in.
Wow.
And it's like most people would be sitting there going, tomorrow I'm going to be a World Cup winner. My life is made. And he was saying, tomorrow I'm going to be a World Cup winner.
What can I
This
give?
is the start of my journey in terms of how I give everything back into the people that got me to where I got. And it's just, it's.
I'm going to get you to share me some information on that, because I definitely want to have a look at that. But you just spoke obviously about podcasts as well, that might lead into that. But the final question is always, is there any books that you recommend to people out there, you know, searching for leadership ideas, searching for information, or, you know, just looking to switch off? You know, what would you recommend in you know, your favorite books or podcasts there as well?
A couple of books. Indistractable is one I really like. It's kind of like a newer version of a book called Deep Work. Ultimately, the summary is simple, which is you need to find time to have no distractions and focus on a specific topic. And I think in today's world where everything is competing for your time, and it's interesting, I always remember when I first joined Kobo, I met our then CTO Trevor Hunter, and he was saying, we're not competing against physical books. And I was like, sure we are. It's digital books versus physical books. He was like, no. We're competing against time. That is the competition. He goes, we're competing against Facebook. TikTok didn't exist back then, unfortunately. But that is what we're competing
Facebook,
for.
Instagram, all the social side of things. Hobbies, if people are going to go to, you know, the gym as opposed to read a book, kids, time, so
it's everything is a time thief. And this book is all about how do you carve out spots in your day to really focus. And there's been loads of research on things like, you know, when you're doing kind of soft work, which is like emails and Slack and all this kind of stuff, you feel like you're achieving stuff because you're getting that indicator from 12 down to 0 or whatever it may be.
It's tick box done.
But psychologically, you're not. You're not actually getting a real sense of achievement. Whereas if you sit down and do 3 hours on a deep topic, which could be learning something, it could be writing something, whatever it may be, your sense of achievement goes way up. And much better feel good about your job and what you're doing. And that's kind of what Indistractable gets to, which is how can you train yourself to not be distracted by stuff, and how can you find that time to focus in a world that's very, very busy. And it's good because it recognizes the facts that you've got kids and dogs, and you know the boiler is broken and this is happening over there, and you still need to find that time to get some focus space. So
no, that sounds really good. I think there's parts of my leadership management that, you know, what you're saying here is definitely resonating with me, and where it can potentially hopefully improve things. So again, thanks a million for your time, Tim, because I appreciate you're a very, very busy man, and I've just come in and took that time off you.
No.
But, it was absolutely a pleasure to have you, and I wish you all the success going forward, as always.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Tim.